Yo, what's going on, guys? Crispy Flakes here. For today's video, we are checking out a video by Sporting Logically titled "The NBA Has Fixed Tanking," which I'm really curious to see what Tucker has to say about this. Last I was reading about it, Adam Silver was discussing the concept of regulation, which basically means that if you finish last place in the NBA, you are going to get sent to the G League, and the G League team is going to take your spot, which just sounds horrible, by the way. Can you imagine being a Lakers fan and you get switched out for a G League team for a season? And not to mention, too, what if the Lakers go to the G League, and let's say my Pistons finish last place the next season? Are the Lakers in the Eastern Conference all of a sudden? He basically did say that there's like no chance this would ever happen, just too much like logistical reasonings and whatnot. So yeah, let's see what Tucker's got to say about the NBA ending tanking. Hey, if I can also ask you to hit that like and subscribe button, man, we are almost to 300,000 subscribers. Let's get it.
In the NBA has been a problem for years. You go all the way back to the Philadelphia 76ers in the process that really started this idea of modern tanking. Teams intentionally losing games, trading away all their veterans, resting their veterans, and their...
Would you say like historically that was like the spotlight for tanking, or do you guys think tanking's been around a lot longer, that just maybe not so much talked about?
Good players to try and lose as many games as possible. Then you fast forward to teams like Oklahoma City that were almost forced into tanking because of a trade request by Paul George to get to LA. They also moved Russell Westbrook, and for the last couple of years they've been trying to lose as many games as possible.
They've been doing it right though, for sure,
as possible, and get themselves in the best draft position and just get out of where they would have been had they kept Westbrook and Paul George, the dreaded middle of the NBA. And
you know, I thought it was really cool with OKC that one season where they had Chris Paul, and it's like they still had all these picks, and even as far as like tanking goes, they didn't really need to do that because just like they had so many picks already, so they could go out and play competitive basketball. And then I think they made like the 8th seed or something like that, wasn't it, that season? Which was pretty cool, man. Which was pretty cool to see.
Obviously, teams intentionally losing games was a huge problem for the league, not only because it put a bad product on the floor, but also because teams were making it so obvious. They were intentionally resting their stars. They were trading away veterans.
Load managing.
Only because of the value that it provided in terms of getting better draft position. But the bigger issue for the league was not tanking
Nick
itself and how it looked, but the fact
Sauce
that
Castillo.
And it clearly, no matter what they tried to do in the years coming that we're going to talk about here in a second, tanking was still very clearly the best team building strategy out there for most teams. If you didn't have a superstar player on your roster or a couple of star players on your roster, you had a 0% chance of winning an NBA title. And teams increasingly looked at that situation and realized, what's the point of winning 45 games? What's the point of winning 48 games if we're not legitimate contenders?
That was the Pistons for a long time.
To grow in popularity. And over the years, the league has tried to implement new measures in order to deter tanking, because again, the biggest issue is that this works and that you are incentivized in certain ways to lose in the NBA if you're not one of the top tier contenders. So eventually, of course, they added the play-in tournament, which was supposed to be an anti-tanking measure. They changed the draft lottery odds, so you are less incentivized to go all the way to the bottom of the lottery odds. I think those things have helped, and certainly they were smart decisions, smarter than some of the other stuff that,
you know, in like tanking and getting those top draft picks and superstars, obviously very, very important. But I still look at a team like the Golden State Warriors. What made the Golden State Warriors great? What made the Tim Duncan, you know, San Antonio Spurs great? Obviously, Tim Duncan was a top pick and everything like that. But both those teams, they were able to scout out the guys that everybody else slept on. You know, the Steph Currys who fell in the draft, the Klay Thompsons, Draymond Greens, Tony Parkers, Manu Ginobili's. So those picks are important, but you still got to be able to like execute the rest of it too. And I think that's why we see a lot of teams that maybe have tanked in the past that haven't really found that championship success yet.
Was getting thrown out there as solutions at the time, whether it be eliminating the draft lottery entirely and just going by record draft order, having pretty much everybody have the same odds at the first overall pick. There were some crazy ideas thrown.
Yeah, I hate the idea of that.
Day of tanking, and ultimately, like I said, they landed on the play-in tournament and changing the lottery odds. However, all of those changes and all the conversation around tanking and what it means for the league and whether it's good or not for the league, all of that has led to, I think, what is going to be a pivotal moment where all of these anti-tanking strategies are going to be put to the test this year.
Oh, damn.
Because the whole reason that the NBA changed these rules and entertained all these different ideas on how to go against tanking was because they knew that it worked. Like teams,
especially this year with Victor being in the draft class,
and ultimately what Oklahoma City did and a number of different teams throughout the years have done, they weren't just doing that for no reason. They know that it works. They know that especially for smaller market teams that don't have the opportunities in free agency and in trades that other teams have had since, the draft is by far their best chance of competing for and winning a title. When you You think about teams over the years that have won a title in smaller markets, teams like Milwaukee. They had Giannis there, a legitimate superstar. Yes, a star they didn't get with the first overall pick, but your opportunity to get a Giannis level player is so much higher. The chance of that is so much higher if you have a top 3 pick in the draft. And speaking of a Giannis level player, like I said, this is the year that all this is going to be put to the test. Because if you are a smaller market team, for example, this year, if you are Utah, if you are San Antonio, the reason you
I can't believe Utah and San Antonio right now. Them teams are absolutely balling out right now, man. Lauri Markkanen, like, who's the one dude, the point guard, what's his name? Jones, I believe, on the San Antonio Spurs.
Yes,
watch out, NBA.
Get, guys like Jalen Green and Jabari Smith if you're Houston. It's nice to get guys like Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey if you're Detroit. But the real reason that you tank, if you're one of those teams, is to get either Victor Wembanyama or, to a lesser extent, Scoot Henderson. These are the kinds of players that tanking exists for. Generational, one-of-one, incredible, all-NBA.
You got to be selective when you tank.
You can get on your team, if you're San Antonio, if you're Utah, if you're Indiana, that you would never have the opportunity to do otherwise. Because the teams in LA, the teams in New York, Miami, those are teams that are going to have opportunities throughout the careers of players that are drafted first overall.
The branding, yeah.
Level players.
That's a good point.
Have opportunities in free agency or via trades to bring those guys in because they're such destinations. The other 25 teams in the league, not so much. And so again, tanking is, to me,
no
not
state
only
tax
a
in Miami.
necessary team building strategy for a lot of teams, but still by far the most effective, even with the play-in tournament, which I think is arguable whether it's been an anti-tanking measure, even with the change in a lot.
But I will say, though, like, even if you are like a Detroit or an OKC or, like one of those destinations that free agents don't typically sign with, like, I think for the Pistons to be able to retain Cade Cunningham, for him to say, I want to stay here long term, like, they are going to have like success of, competent management and everything along those lines. And even sometimes that's on though, but I guess also when you combined that with the new like Supermax contract thing, it does at least give you the opportunity to retain those players too. Cause I always get nervous about when so-and-so team drafts, like Zion's on the Pelicans. I know like there was rumors that his family didn't really want to be like New Orleans or anything like that. So, I mean, you just hope that they're able to put together a good product and keep these players long-term.
Lottery odds, which again I think is arguable whether that's actually changed tanking, because there were conversations at the time they put in these new rules about how, okay, tanking's over, it doesn't make any sense to do it anymore, when arguably, especially in a situation like this season where the opportunity is so great to get a superstar level player at the top of the draft, these rules in some ways help these other teams. Because if you're one of these teams, let's say we get towards the end of the year, we're going to talk about specific teams in a second, but if you're one of these teams that are, the ninth best team in the Eastern Conference, right? Like, it's clear with 25 games to go, you are not a contender, you're not a very good team, and the play-in is nice, but doesn't it make more sense to push your way down more to like the 5th or the 6th spot in the lottery where, yes.
Yeah, I think it's why like teams like the Utah Jazz are 3-1, where I think management wise, you tell your coaches, hey, like, we try and tank here, but I don't know. I feel like players, cause they're playing for their contracts, they're playing for the next season, everything like that in a lot of cases, and trying to up their trade value or whatever it may be, get out of maybe a rebuilding situation if they're a veteran. And it just really like makes you wonder, are they buying to the tank here to like, I'm going to go out there and ball and do what I can do? Like, I ain't stepping down.
The odds out of the top, but they've also widened the odds in the middle of the draft lottery. We have teams in the past, teams like Memphis, teams like New Orleans, that made huge jumps in the draft lottery and ended up with guys like Zion, ended up with guys like Ja Morant. The Lakers got a pivotal.
Pelicans have the Lakers pick, by the way,
because they went all the way up to 4th in the draft. So even though the incentive to have one of the 3 worst records in the league is lower, arguably the incentive to miss the playoffs entirely, if you're clearly not a contending team, the incentive for that is arguably increased as a result of these new lottery odds, because we've seen teams take massive jumps that in the case of New Orleans, Memphis, and LA, all of those teams benefited greatly from these new lottery odds. And I think we're going to see teams like that, where it's like, would I rather be the 9th seed in the East and have a play-in game, and I'm very clearly not very good, or would I rather have like a 10% chance at getting the 1st or 2nd pick, or a 5% chance at getting the 1st or 2nd pick in a draft that clearly has 2 can't miss players at the top?
Yeah, you no longer want to be a middle of the road NBA team.
That's tanking. That's the whole idea that the NBA tried to take away by having the play-in tournament, by having the draft lottery odds changed, and actually in an interesting way. In a year like this, where it's so clear how good the players are at the top, it's almost doing the exact opposite of what they hoped that it would do. And so this is what I mean. Like, if we just put all the teams on the screen right here, really think about some teams that might end up tanking this year that you're not thinking about right now. So
I'm here like 0-3. They need a power 40. Put Victor there, or I'd probably Bam at the 4. Victor at the 5. Oh.
Obviously, at the beginning of the season, we've got teams like Indiana, Utah, San Antonio that are not putting in effort to try and win. They traded away players. They're very young. They have all these different assets.
They somehow finding a way, though. San Antonio Spurs.
Henderson sweepstakes, okay? However, other teams, let's just go with the Eastern Conference here. Orlando. I think they're going to be pretty good. I think they're going to push for the play-in, but if they have a couple of injuries like they already have, or guys just don't play as well as they hope, they're going to be a tanking team. There's no reason for them to try and win 35 games when they have an opportunity to add a guy that would completely put them over the top in terms of talent, and Victor Wembanyama, or a guard that they desperately need in Scoot Henderson.
See, I think the teams you really got to look out for are the ones that are like really just, they lose in some close games. Because it's like, wow, you could like see like that's going to be like a really good team. There's like a piece away. But it's like they probably could win some of those games now, but maybe they're just pulling back a little bit.
Right, same thing. There's expectations there. If they don't meet those expectations, there's no point in winning 35 games.
With soft and blow. Can somebody explain to me the Pistons draft situation? Because I think the OKC Thunder have the Pistons pick, but there's protections on that, right? Like, is it like top 3 protected or something? Or is it lottery protected? Because I want to know, like, should I be rooting for the Pistons to tank? I've been reading about it, and I like all I've seen is just like the OKC Thunder has the Pistons pick. So something I'm missing here.
They're going to be in the tanking sweepstakes potentially. A team like Washington, Bradley Beal has had multiple injury issues over the last couple of seasons. Some of them real, some of them not. He could request a trade at any point if things start to go poorly for them, and they're not a team that's pushing for the postseason. They're absolutely going to be in the tanking sweepstakes. There's some longer shots as well. A team like
trade Beal for Westbrook, get off the contract, start the rebuild.
From having someone like Victor Wembanyama on their team, if they're like the 8th best
get them
team
picks
in the Eastern
too.
Conference with 25 games left, they might start shutting guys down. I wouldn't be surprised at that at all. Then you go to the Western Conference. Portland is a team that I certainly would keep an eye on. If Dame is, has injuries,
they balling out too.
Like he has
game 4-0.
Certainly last season, they could be a tanking team as well. It's a very young roster, and it's a roster they've invested
Season's
in
shocking
this
me.
season, but they would have an opportunity to go for the first pick in this draft if a couple of things went poorly for their season. Sacramento is always a threat for this. I know that they really are incentivized to make the playoffs because they haven't in so long, but again, injuries can play a big part in that. Oklahoma City certainly is near the top of that list. I think there's a disaster scenario for Phoenix where maybe they end up thinking that they have a better chance of, if they're the 8th or 9th team in the lottery.
Keep Devin Booker, Mikal, trade everyone else.
A ton of other teams as well.
Sorry, Chris Paul.
Look at around the league, the landscape where you could have with 25 games left, you could have teams in January, February tanking at a rate of like a third of the league. 10 or 12 or 13 of the teams in the league might not even be trying. And not only does that matter in terms of showing that the anti-tanking measures don't matter in a year like this when the talent is the way it is at the top of the
I will say though, I don't know, don't y'all think like the NBA kind of has like, I don't want to say like a problem, but it's like we kind of have like a general idea of which teams have a chance at the championship. I'm not saying teams that can be competitive. I think there's a lot of those, but I don't know, like I think Sport Logic brings up a good point, just like saying like if you only have like a chance at the play-in tournament, like what's the point of going for that, especially in like today's era?
Draft. Not only does that hurt the product, but guess what? If you're a contender, right? Like if you're a team that is a top 4, top 5 seed in your conference and you need a little bit of help on the wing, or you need another guard off the bench, or you need some big depth, guess what? There are going to be 10, 11, 12 teams out there willing to trade you guys so that they can be worse and so that they can continue to tank towards hopefully in their eyes.
It's going to be a top-heavy league.
In the draft. It's an incredible year if you're truly a contender that either owes future picks to other teams. I think certainly that's the case for, a variety of teams around the league because we've seen an increase of that over the years. If you're a team that just you're getting older and this is like your last shot or next year's your last shot at getting a title, you're going to have plenty of opportunities to trade picks, to trade young players, to go out and get veterans. And I think that's one of the reasons we've seen the Lakers wait on a Russell Westbrook trade because they think that their opportunities to trade those 2 future first round picks are going to be better. As the season progresses, as teams continue to tank, there's going to be a ton of veterans available.
Yeah, trade 1 pick instead of 2.
Does this impact the bottom of the league? And I think it's kind of a test for the new measures they've implemented, but also really, really impacts the top of the league.
I think by the trade deadline, I do think Russell and 1 first-round pick is straight to the Pacers. I think that's going to happen. I think they're going to wait it out. Might be too late for the Lakers, though, to like run off that, so they got to somewhat keep their head over water, but we'll see.
Championship race, and we could see some unbelievable teams facing each other in the postseason because they've really geared up for the playoffs by just picking off these veterans from all these tanking teams. And if you watched any of my videos in the past on tanking or on teams intentionally losing, you know my stance on this. It's almost impossible, apart from a drastic measure that would just make the league worse and create all these other problems.
Yep.
It's basically impossible for the league to ever fully de-incentivize tanking. As long as basketball is played the way that it is and one player can make such a dramatic impact and a positive impact on a team's trajectory and their future.
And maybe the way to fix tanking is figuring out how to attract free agents to small markets. Maybe there should be like a small market incentive where if you go to a small market team, you can make like an extra 5%. I don't know. But even that, is that, I mean, because that's kind of like favoritism toward like based off the market size. So
Sure. As long as that's the case, tanking and being at the top of the draft is going to matter. And with the way the lottery odds are now, and with how smart teams are now in the front office, they're going to continue to tank. And I'm fine with it. I think it's part of the league.
Like the maybe they call it like the $1 million can't have shit in Detroit clause. I don't know.
Good or not, it's a part of team building. Is a real legitimate strategy. It's not an accident. Teams are not doing this just because they feel like it. They're doing it because it puts themselves in a better position to win a title moving forward. Now there are other
big gambles too with it
in terms of being, in the lottery or in the top 5 of the draft multiple years in a row. I think that's an interesting thing to take a look at. For teams that have been in the top 5 of the draft lottery, whether it be because of the odds or because of how bad they were multiple years in a row. I think there are still some tweaks you can make. I'm not saying that the system is perfect, but as long as the situation is the way that it is, they're never going to be able to fully get rid of tanking. And in years like this, which is going to happen every 10, 15 years,
generational player,
generational prospect like this that is going to cause teams to go absolutely crazy with the tanking. And this year is one of those years. And the craziest part about all this is there's no guarantee that any of these teams are going to get the first or the second pick in this draft. If there's 12 teams tanking, only 2 of those teams can end up with what are
the rest are screwed for another year.
This class. There's other guys in this class that we're going to learn about throughout the year, but right now it's clear who the top 2 guys are. And guess what's going to happen the year after that, and the year after that, and the year after that to the teams that don't get the first or second pick in this draft. They're going to be bad again next year and the year after that, and there's going to be this continued rollover effect year after year of a class like this, where it's very clear that teams are going to be tanking, they're going to be trying to be bad, and that's going to have a ripple effect and a rollover effect for years for them, just trading away players, looking towards the future. And we could be looking at a situation over the next couple of years where it's very clear, there's 5 or 6 teams at the top, there's 12 teams at the bottom, there's a handful of teams in the middle, and nothing else matters. And
yeah, I think a lot of great points are brought up here, but it's like, I don't know, at some point, the owners of these teams and the general managers and the people trying to keep their jobs and everything, like, are they going to be willing to put their future at risk on these draft lottery odds? It's like, when you become rich enough to own an NBA team, chances are you did it by making obviously like risky investments can pay off and things like that in certain circumstances, but you're a businessman, have that business mind and everything like that. And it's just like, it makes you wonder about like that risk reward. Like what exactly broke down statistically would that look like? But that's all we got for this video. Great video by Sporting Logically. As always, man, link to his channel description below. Thank you all so much for watching, and peace out, my friends.